Kung Fu Panda was never just another movie about talking animals. It was a monumental declaration of love for Eastern culture and cinema classics. Remember the first installments, every frame breathed the Wuxia aesthetic, the genre of noble heroes and martial arts masters. We remember the silence, we remember the work with color, we remember how the film knew how to go quiet, letting the viewer feel the moment of philosophy or Oogway's inner peace. But when you turn on the fourth part, you won't see the continuation of a legend. You will see a product. The genre betrayal happened unnoticed. Epic fantasy turned into a sterile buddy movie, a partner comedy that we've seen hundreds of times. DreamWorks seemingly got cold feet about their own depth. The atmosphere of a mysterious, majestic China was replaced by the hustle and bustle of an overcrowded metropolis. Instead of a meditative hero's journey, a jagged pace where scenes change faster than you can even process the dialogue. This is the diabetes of the animation world. Everything is very bright, very fast, but absolutely empty inside. Look at the combat choreography. Before, Kung Fu was a storytelling tool. We felt the physics of every strike, saw the ingenuity of the masters inspired by the works of Jackie Chan. In the fourth part, Kung Fu has degraded to the level of a magic show. Characters just fly, glow, and turn into clouds of smoke. The studio is no longer trying to surprise us with staging. They are burying the screen in special effects, hoping that behind the flashes, we won't notice the absence of soul. And this is the first symptom of creative impotence. When creators stop believing that their world is interesting on its own, they start overloading it with cheap attractions to hold attention. The franchise that taught us inner peace has itself turned into restless and meaningless noise. If a villain is a reflection of the hero, then the chameleon is a crooked mirror that shattered before the film even started. The main problem with the fourth part isn't even the self-repetition, but the fact that DreamWorks completely tore up their own rules of the game. Remember, the antagonists of the trilogy. Tai Lung is the living embodiment of cheated expectations and rage. Lord Shen is a tragic psychopath embodying genocide and the fear of the future. Kai is the very incarnation of the thirst for power and oblivion. Each of them had an ideology that forced Po to change and grow above himself. And now, look at the chameleon. Her motivation? I wasn't allowed into a kung fu school because I'm small. Seriously? In a world where one of the greatest masters is a literal praying mantis, where Viper became a legend despite having no limbs, where Master Mouse is actual canon. The writers straight up ignored the entire lore of the universe for the sake of one flat, lazy excuse. The chameleon inspires neither sympathy nor dread. She's just a function. The studio gave her the ability to copy other characters not because the plot needed it, but because it was the cheapest way to sell nostalgia. Why write a deep villain when you can just hit the copy-paste button and show Tai Lung or Kai for 5 seconds? This is the definition of creative bankruptcy, when an antagonist exists only to justify a parade of cameos. She doesn't change Po, she doesn't challenge his convictions. She's a hollow vessel, just like the script itself. When the scale of the threat drops to the level of a resentful lizard, the hero himself inevitably shrinks. In the end, we didn't get a clash of titans. We got a back-alley scuffle being marketed as the finale of an era. The greatest crime of the fourth installment is how dirty the studio played with the fans' expectations. Let's call it what it is. Tai Lung in this movie is cheap, blatant clickbait. The studio knew damn well they had nothing to say, that the script was empty and derivative. But they needed a box office hit. That's exactly why they shamelessly plastered the snow leopard on every poster and shoved him into every trailer. They were literally pulling on the heartstrings of nostalgia, promising the return of a legend and a clash of ideologies. They sold us an epic and handed us a cardboard cutout. Tai Lung isn't a character here. He has no agency and no impact on the story. He's a battery they pulled out of a box to justify the chameleon's existence and lure us into theaters. It's the ultimate cynicism, using the franchise's most dramatic antagonist as silent background filler who just nods and fades away at the end. The studio didn't just fail to come up with something new, they squandered a great legacy that took years to build, turning a hero's personal tragedy into a marketing tool for ticket sales. Every chapter of Kung Fu Panda had a philosophical thread that gave the story depth. The first was about self-acceptance. There is no secret ingredient. The second was about finding inner peace by reconciling with the past. The third was about embracing the role of a mentor and taking responsibility for others. The fourth part tries to tackle the theme of passing the torch, but it fails miserably. Look, Po didn't earn the Dragon Warrior title over 3 movies. He got it as an advance right at the start, but he proved he deserved it. Think back to the first film. Yesterday's noodle cook, a guy with 0 skills, consciously walks towards certain death for the sake of the valley. He doesn't expect to beat Tai Lung. He just wants to buy the people time to escape. That was an act of ultimate self-sacrifice and the total acceptance of his fate. His path was paved with sweat, blood, and a genuine, burning desire to protect. But what do we see in the 4th installment? They try to convince us that Po is ready to become a spiritual leader, but his spirituality here is limited to cheap dumplings jokes. His retirement feels fake because it doesn't come from internal growth. It happens because the script demanded it. The studio just needed an excuse to plug in a new character for the assembly line. And this brings us to the peak of the absurdity: Jen the Fox. The title of the Dragon Warrior, a symbol of balance and the highest valor, is handed over to a petty thief basically through cronyism. Jen doesn't go through a transformation. She doesn't perform a feat even remotely comparable to what Po did. She just happened to be there at the right time in the runtime. This is the death of the franchise's philosophy. When a title that heroes of the past gave their lives for turns into a relay baton, you can toss to the first decent person you meet. DreamWorks replaced a deep parable about legacy with a shallow story where the world's most sacred things are devalued for the convenience of the writers. This block is the point of no return. Now, we're going to talk about a literal murder, the murder of the character who was the heart and the most painful wound of the entire franchise. Let's go back to the first movie. Remember that cry from the soul that still gives you chills? I did everything to make you proud. Tell me how proud you are, Shifu. Tell me. That wasn't the scream of a villain trying to conquer the world. It was the scream of an abandoned child whose world collapsed because the person closest to him couldn't show love when it mattered. It was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions packed into a cartoon about a panda. We waited 15 years for Tai Lung's return not to see his fists, but to see that gaping wound in his soul finally close. Now look at what they spat at us in Part 4, a sterile, castrated house cat. Tai Lung here is just a hollow shell, a silent unit from a video game. They strip his powers, he stands in line, and in the end, just think about this. He humbly acknowledges Po and walks into a portal. Where is his rage? Where is his pain? Where are his questions for Shifu? Where is even a drop of the charisma that made us tremble back in 2008? This is the peak of creative impotence, when you have a character of this caliber in your hands and you use him as background furniture. The studio was simply too terrified to touch complex themes. They decided that showing us a familiar face on screen would be enough for us to happily swallow this substitute. It's blatant, cynical parasitism. And you know what's the scariest part? While I was sitting in that theater watching this disgrace, a script came together in my head in 5 minutes. One that is deeper, more epic, and more logical than the entire mess dozens of top-tier DreamWorks writers sweated over. If an ordinary fan can brainstorm a narrative during the screening that actually honors the franchise's legacy, then what were the people with million-dollar budgets doing? They simply chose not to try. Now, let me show you what this story could have been if its creators had even a shred of respect for their own heritage. Instead of chewing on the same old rags with the chameleon, the writers could have raised the stakes to the heavens. Imagine this. An entity appears in the spirit realm that breaks the very concept of power. Not just another villain, but something so ancient and majestic that it erases Master Oogway from existence in the very first seconds of the film. The idol is toppled, the protector is gone. Po is left alone against a threat that isn't just stronger than him, it's beyond his comprehension. Shifu realizes the Five and Po won't make it. They need balance. They need to unite pure light and primordial darkness. He makes a desperate move. He turns to the secret, forbidden scrolls and brings Tai Lung back to the world of the living. But the price of this ritual is the life of the summoner himself. The moment Tai Lung materializes in our world, he doesn't see an enemy. He sees a dying father. And here is the moment this movie should have been made for. Shifu, losing his final drops of chi, embraces Tai Lung, not as a star pupil, not as the dragon warrior, but as a son. He admits all his mistakes, taking with him all the pain the leopard had hoarded for decades. This confession breaks Tai Lung more than any fight ever could. His rage dies out, giving way to true strength. Po and Tai Lung become reluctant partners, the perfect yin and yang duo. Po teaches Tai Lung inner balance and forgiveness, the foundation Shifu once failed to lay. Tai Lung, in turn, drills the panda, teaching him iron discipline, grit, and the technique of a true master that Po always lacked. They aren't just partners, they are two halves of one whole. In the final battle, they fight in absolute sync, where one misses a strike, the other is already there to cover. When the enemy offers Tai Lung power capable of rewriting reality, he simply looks at Po and understands. Real strength isn't in scrolls or divine artifacts, it's in the ones standing shoulder to shoulder with you. Victory doesn't come through a fluke, but through achieving peak mastery. Po realizes his new purpose. He becomes a true spiritual leader because he was able to guide back to the light someone even the gods had given up on. And Tai Lung, rightfully, after going through hell, the death of his father, and a total rebirth, accepts the title of the Dragon Warrior. Now, he is the shield protecting all of China. And here it is, the final shot. The shot that would have left the theater in tears. We see Tai Lung standing under those very palace gates. There, at the bottom of the stairs, he finds a tiny infant, a little red panda. The camera mimics the scene from the beginning of the first movie frame for frame. Tai Lung slowly picks up the baby and holds him close, giving him the love he once received himself. And nearby stands Po. He doesn't say a word. He just smiles, watching history fix its greatest mistake and come full circle. That would have been a legend. A story about how forgiveness is stronger than resentment, and how legacy isn't about tossing a stick to the first person you see. It's an agonizing journey of the soul's transformation. But DreamWorks chose safety, a kleptomaniac fox, and merch. They chose to sell us a wrapper instead of giving us a finale that would live forever. And that is the true peak of their creative impotence.